Whoever it was who thought up this idea of celebrating the major feasts of our church for 8 days afterwards was brilliant, I think, because the major feasts like Christmas and Easter, they're just too much to take in at one time. How could you take in what happened at Christmas, the event that we celebrated Christmas, in a lifetime? God becomes human. That blows the mind. If I was God, I would not have become human. Knowing humans as I do, knowing myself as I do. I'd have come as an angel, or I'd have come in a whirlwind or something like that and make myself known. But God chose to become one of us for our sake. And so as we think about that through these Christmas days, a lot of it can sink in if we take it apart piece by piece. For instance, today we celebrate the fact that Jesus became the member of a human family, just like everybody in this room did. We all had a mother, and we all had a father, and we all learned how to love in that small group, which sometimes got to be a larger group, as in my case. We learned to love in the family. Love 101. Jesus learned to love in his family. He learned from his parents as a human being. He is like us in all things except sin, St. Paul tells us. That's the basic Christian belief. God did become a human being exactly like us in all things except sin. And he grew up, and he was a teenager. Remember the running away from his parents in Jerusalem? He was a teenager. He did his own thing. Jacob, don't get any ideas. You're not there yet. He became strong. He was filled with wisdom gradually, the way young people learn in school, at home. So this feast today brings down to us the humanity of the God who came among us. But it isn't so unusual that God would come into a family because he came from a family. We believe in the Trinity, do we not? Which is the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Individuals, but one being. Mind-boggling, don't even try to unwrap that one. But he came from a community where love dominated, where love was the very existence of the community. God is love, St. John says. And so he came from one loving community into another one, which is exactly what we have to do in the time that is given to us on this planet. We are brought into the world, and if we were left to our own devices, we would turn into monsters. What is the most selfish thing you have ever experienced in your life? A newborn infant. Pretty maybe, but really self-centered. Correct? Where does the child unlearn all that selfishness? In the heart of the family, ideally. So we're reminded that the community, the family, is the core place for love to be seen and heard and understood and absorbed and practiced. But we also need to remember that we belong to many families, not just our natural genetic family. We belong to the family in the place where we live. And so often what happens with individuals is, even at home, they don't pick up what it means to love selflessly, to love others. They become very individualistic, self-centered, and hard to live with. That can happen outside the natural family. That can happen in the community. People who live in a town or a village or a nation selfishly, taking no concern for the others in that community. They don't vote, they don't take an interest in anything but themselves, and things begin to go downhill. The community becomes corrupt sometimes, dishonest. The economic community. We belong to a worldwide, we know it now, the world is a village, economic community. And if we don't practice the Christian love that we have experienced and learned in Christ, then many, many people will suffer because of selfishness, concern only for my nation, my stocks, my welfare. If we talk about the community, a family of nations, but nations can also become just as obnoxious as self-centered people who never have learned love. And when nations don't work together, we experience what we're experiencing now, if you've read the paper day by day. War and strife and people being, their homes destroyed, driven off their land. Our fellow Christians who for 1,700 years lived in Iraq are now almost gone, driven away. Because we are not, as a people, all of us, living together worldwide as a family. We're becoming individualistic. And so the Feast of the Holy Family reminds us that love not only must be learned, but it must be lived. It must be practiced day in and day out, not just in a superficial way, but in the way that this child Jesus eventually taught us, a self-sacrificing way. And that applies to the individual, that applies to the family, and the town, and the nation, and the world. Christmas is a time to reevaluate how we as a people, or as an individual, have responded to the love that was given to us in the person of Christ. And the rest of our lives, of course, will determine what that response is.